Hirono is joining us next by WebEx.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask Ms. Bickert to respond to three questions that I have for her very briefly. A recent report from the MIT Technology Review found that Facebook's ad delivery algorithm discriminated based on gender when serving ads for jobs. There are numerous other examples of Facebook's system discriminating on the basis of age, gender, and race and delivering housing, job, and financial services ads. Facebook's Help Center describes what factors it uses to target ads to users, including, quote, other information about you from your Facebook account, such as your age, your gender. Facebook also allows ads to be targeted based on things like zip codes that can be used as a proxy for race. Question one. Are you concerned that Facebook's reliance on these factors and targeting ads results in discrimination? Can you give a yes or no answer, please, Ms. Bickert?
Senator, thank you. Making sure that our ads are served in a fair way without discrimination is always a priority for us, and we do have policies in place to prevent discriminatory targeting. I'm very happy to follow up with you in the interest of time on some of the specifics of those policies.
Well, how does Facebook ensure that it does not violate, for example, civil rights laws when targeting ads for housing, employment, and financial services?
Senator, thank you. We have policies around when people can use certain targeting criteria. So for instance, we don't allow some of the more sensitive targeting criteria that you have mentioned. We don't allow that for certain types of advertisements, such as financial services advertisements or housing advertisements. But I can follow up with you on some of those specifics and how we ensure that the ads are served in a fair way.
So you've addressed the concerns raised by the recent report from the MIT Technology Review that found discrimination on the basis of gender, for example, that you've addressed those concerns raised by this report?
Senator, I'm not familiar with that specific report, so I can't comment on that. I can tell you in my years of being in this job, making sure that we do not have discriminatory ads has been a priority for us. We've worked on that for years, made a number of improvements, and I can follow up with those details.
Yes, I hope you can follow up after you've read the MIT Technology Review, and I don't think they're the only ones who raised those concerns. Third question, when Facebook has been sued for discrimination by its ad targeting algorithm, it has often hidden behind Section 230. Earlier this year, I joined Senators Warner and Klobuchar in introducing the Safe Tech Act, which would remove Section 230 immunity for violations of civil rights laws. We're not talking about total removal of Section 230, but as referencing civil rights laws. Do you agree that Facebook should not be immune under Section 230 when it discriminates when delivering ads?
Senator, thank you for the question. I agree that there should be regulation to hold social media companies accountable. I think that there is a lot to consider when crafting that regulation. I put out a white paper on how I think regulation could work, and I look forward to having those conversations. And I know our team does as well with your office and other offices.
For Mr. Donovan and Dr. Donovan and Mr. Harris, do you think that regulation is appropriate to prevent Facebook ads from discriminating, or should we just eliminate the immunity from lawsuits for civil rights laws discrimination? Briefly, Dr. Donovan and Mr. Harris.
Yeah, this is Dr. Donovan. I think that we do need to have some carve out related to civil rights violations, especially that would require oversight. One of the main problems here that we're addressing is that when automation is matched with amplification, that is, there's no review of these ads, we don't know who we're doing business with. Not only does Facebook not know who they're doing business with directly, and we see a bunch of different shell games with some of the stuff that they've implemented related to advertisers disclosing who they really are. But overwhelmingly, over the pandemic, we've seen all kinds of scams, grifts, and hoaxes that violate people's civil rights. And so we do need this.
Appreciate that you think there should be a carve out. Mr. Harris, do you think there should be a carve out for civil rights violations?
I'm not familiar with the exact way the legislation is written, but that is, I would be sort of in support of that. I think the important thing to recognize here is, as Joan was just saying, is that the companies make money by not having human oversight and discernment. And the
Thank you.
premise is that more of this, yeah.
I'm dying to ask this one last question, Mr. Chairman. Apple released a software update this week that gives users control over whether apps are able to track them when they use other apps and surf the web. Giving users greater control over their online privacy strikes me as a positive thing. This is for Mr. Harris. What do you think the impact of this change will be, both on the issue of misinformation and division we're talking about today, and the system of surveillance capitalism that companies like Facebook and Google rely on more broadly?
Yeah, well, I applaud Apple for making this small step in. I think of it almost like a carbon tax on micro-targeted advertising. So if we're left with this sort of extractive business model that treats us as the product and not the customer, then removing micro-targeted advertising, sort of the hyper-personalization, because apps can track you across applications. Think of it as going more close to the 1970s model of billboards, which are depersonalized, as opposed to this micro-targeted model. Now, that's not completely true, because advertisers can still micro-target you from within the Facebook ecosystem. So it's not going to affect things that much, and it won't address problems like misinformation or polarization, which will continue. It just is almost like a subtle carbon tax on the advertising business model.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator Hirono. Senator